David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So it's not a secret that not every 2020 Democratic presidential candidate is all in for Medicare for all or even for similar sort of universal coverage proposals. And one of those people is Joe Biden. Joe Biden has now said more about the specifics of his health care proposal. And it's so outrageous that more than half of Americans straight up can't afford it. And what I mean by that is Joe Biden was interviewed on WHO TV the other day. As many of you know, local news stations are crazy about copyright, so I'm not going to play any clips for you, but you can easily find the interview online and check it out in full. And in this interview with the TV station, Joe Biden says that his approach is not a Bernie Sanders-esque Medicare for all approach, which we knew. It's building on Obamacare. And Biden specifically says that he wants to further subsidize private insurance, which is completely broken, of course, in order to reduce yearly copays to $1,000. So for context, a lot of the plans that Biden is talking about have $2,000 a year copays or deductibles. I think I said copay, but I mean deductible. He wants to reduce to $1,000 deductible plans that right now might have a $2,000 deductible or a $2,500 deductible. And he's also open to a public option. And the primary problem with all of this is that it's completely unaffordable for hundreds of millions of people, and it doesn't actually address the real issues with our healthcare system. And I'll explain to you both of those points. You might remember that a few months ago, we did a story about a study which found that presented with an unexpected $400 emergency expense, 40% of the country can't afford it. And by can't afford it, it means they either would have to take out a loan or go into debt, charge it, and pay it off at interest, or borrow from family, or get a payday loan, imagine, which is the worst possibility, in order to cover the unexpected $400 expense. Joe Biden is saying, I will further subsidize insurance in order to reduce the yearly deductible from whatever it is, $2,500 to $2,000, sometimes even more, down to $1,000 out of pocket max. If 40% can't afford an unexpected $400 expense, then certainly more than half of the country can't afford a $1,000 deductible above and beyond premiums and medications and so on and so forth. Now, what this also ignores, of course, is the cost of the plans themselves. Biden's talking just about lowering the deductible to $1,000. And then Biden adds, I guess sort of like as a wink, wink, or an attempt to bring in some of the people who understand how broken our healthcare system is, Biden says that he's also open to a public option. And sure, a public option is a fine idea if you are comparing between what we have now and what we have now plus a public option. Sure, I'll take the public option. But a Congressional Budget Office study found that a public option would basically only lower monthly premiums by 7 to 8%. This barely makes a dent, especially when you consider how quickly premiums are going up year after year. Biden also repeats in this interview what is basically a Republican talking point, which is that under Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All plan, you would lose your insurance. It's incredibly dishonest. It's not true. The way it would work is a public option would be put in place immediately during the 4-year phase-in to Medicare for All, during which the age for Medicare eligibility gets lowered and lowered until everybody is in. To say you lose your insurance under Bernie's plan is incomplete at best and completely dishonest and a Republican talking point at worst. This is the worst part of Joe Biden. These are Republican for-profit health insurance company talking points, and Joe Biden is repeating them. Now, I will try to find some kind of silver lining here. The one thing I appreciate about Joe Biden is he's being upfront with us. He's not for Medicare for all, and he's telling us he's not for Medicare for all. We can debate it. We can discuss whose plan is the best. We can discuss whose plan would be best for low income, middle, whatever. Joe Biden is not playing coy the way that Kamala Harris did, where on a CNN town hall, she said Medicare for all is the way. And then the next day put out a statement saying Medicare for all would be one way and tweaking Obamacare is another way that I would also be open to. Joe Biden has been upfront. He's not for Medicare for all. He's been upfront with the wealthy donors behind closed doors, but it went public, saying your privileged status will remain unchanged if I become president of the United States. He is safe for the super rich. He's been upfront. I don't agree with Biden's politics. I think it's terrible, but he is not sugarcoating it to appear more progressive than he is, and we can actually evaluate it for what it actually is rather than having to read between the lines. And what my assessment is that it's horrible, and I completely disagree with it. We have been sort of toying with the idea of changing the David Pakman Show opening theme song on the basis of remixes made from a voicemail we received. So let me set this back up for you. We received the following voicemail a few weeks ago.
The David Pakman Show, it's my favorite show. You do more good than you know. The David Pakman Show.
Right. So that really will put you in a good mood if you are not in one every single day that you hear that. So we took that and we offered it to the audience and said, if you want to remix that, submit it to us and we will consider a theme song change if there are some really good ones. I played 6 options for you on Monday. Voting has been fast and furious, and the results of the poll are people want us to keep the existing theme song. 29% of the audience says do not change the theme song. 24% of the audience says replace it with option number 4, which I'll play for you in a second. Option number 5 getting 17% of the vote, and some of the other options really not doing well at all. 0% for option number 6, which is sad. Funniest comment was that option number 4 made me consider dropping some Molly. So we are going to keep the theme song that we have, but we are going to use these new options as music before my live streams start on Twitch and YouTube. I actually did that earlier this week during one of my Twitch streams. Just a reminder, the most popular of the remixes was option number 4 from 3 Lawn and the Chosen Masters. Take a listen to this one. Right.
The David Pakman Show, it's my favorite show. You do more good than you know. You do more good than you know. The David Pakman Show, it's my favorite show. The David Pakman Show.
Okay, so it goes on from there. That was the most popular of the options. Number 2 was, the second most popular, that's a confusing way to say it. The second most popular remix was option number 5 by someone known to me only as Sorry for Bat English. Take a listen to that one.
The David Pakman Show, it's my favorite show. The David Pakman Show,
Yeah.
it's my favorite show. You do more good than you know. The David Pakman Show.
Right. So in any case, those were the 2 most popular, but the verdict is we are not changing the David Pakman Show theme song. Some of the more common complaints were, David, anything that says you do more good than you know in your own theme song is extraordinarily narcissistic and you shouldn't do that. Didn't even occur to me because I was having such a good time with the songs. Another one was you really shouldn't have lyrics in the opening theme. And another one was, listen, if I send the show to someone and one of those are the opening theme songs, it's just not going to seem as credible of a show as with what you have now. And what's funny is when we switched the theme song to what it is now, it was like 90% disliked. 90% of the messages I got about it were, this is terrible, huge mistake, your show is going to lose all credibility. And of course, the show has like tripled in size under the current theme song. So I will go with the audience and I will not change the theme song, but sometimes I have to make a call. These are difficult calls to make because the audience generally is just averse to change. But sometimes even if the audience doesn't want a change, I have to make it. And so far, those decisions have worked out pretty well in the past. But the no change vote wins this one. Let me know your reaction. Let me know your level of devastation about this decision on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at @dpakman. We've got a great program planned for you today, and I'm very glad you're with us on this Friday.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, today's new members of the day are Cheryl Alvarez and Jose Mendoza. Thanks to both of you for being new David Pakman Show members, and also want to say thanks to today's longtime sustaining member of the day, Christine Coutinho, who has been with us almost 5 years. Signing up is step one. Staying subscribed is step two, and I really appreciate folks who have been with us 5, 6, 7, even 9 years in some cases, amazingly enough. Sign up at joinpakman.com. There's a coupon code available if you would like it, which will save you 40% off of your membership. That coupon code is ThisIs2020. You don't have to use it, but by all means, feel free. Let's go to the phones at 617-830-4750 and see what is on people's minds today. Let's start with our caller from the 423 area code today. Who's calling from 423?
Am I on?
That is you, my friend.
Okay, well, I appreciate you having me on. Of course, I'm calling from the great city of Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Brilliant.
Yes, border city of Tennessee and Georgia. Anyway, things that have been on my mind, you know, we've got the 2020 election coming up here pretty soon.
Yep.
And me, I consider myself a centrist libertarian. Basically, you know, I'm pretty fine with anybody that really does anything as long as they don't infringe my rights, kind of thing. And really the last guy I wanted to win the election was in 2012 when Ron Paul ran.
What'd you like about him?
Other than that, well, I mean, he was pretty simplified. You know, he was basically for really anything, as long as he didn't, you know, you didn't infringe on your constitutional rights. And he was an isolationist. You know, he wanted to get out of the wars, which, by the way, we're still in. You know, We've been for the last 20 years, and we've spent trillions of dollars on it. It's not worked, and both parties have not worked. And, for example, the right wing, you've had the rise of what I call the Uber patriots.
Right.
The Uber, yes. People call them the alt-right. I call them the Uber patriots. But, yeah, you've had the rise of them, and then, of course, a lot of people on the left, you've kind of had this divide, and that's what's caused a lot of the people on the left to not win as much.
I don't know that I agree with that. I think I agree that the left has not been doing a lot of winning. But I just saw a pretty good study which shows that the left is actually less divided than the right currently, and I find the data believable. So I don't know that I agree with your assessment that the left has been doing a lot of losing. I don't think it's because the left is divided, though.
Right, and this past election, if Bernie had been in, I would have voted for him because he's the only one I actually somewhat liked.
Okay.
And Hillary, you know, like I didn't like her. I didn't like Trump or either of them. I actually made a long Facebook post about how actually, if you think about it, they're very well connected with each other. And honestly, I thought, you know, it was a ploy to keep Bernie out of it.
You think that, but so let's talk. What was a ploy to keep Bernie out? Trump running and Hillary being the nominee in total was a plot to prevent Bernie from being the president, you're saying?
Yes, I know it sounds crazy, but let me explain.
You said it, not me.
Because, right. Anyways, basically, I believe that because if you look at historically, they've been great friends for years, and all of a sudden, you know, he decides to run as a Republican. And if you look at his political stances historically, he's a big flip-flopper. He doesn't stay with one party. He's never been consistent on anything.
He doesn't stay with one woman. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, and another thing too, another phrase I've heard is you couldn't believe him if his tongue was notarized. But anyways, and I believe
but hold on a second. But so let me ask you. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty of it. What overarching group or entity would coordinate both the Republican and the Democratic nominees in order to prevent Bernie from being president? Like who set that up?
Well, I mean, the Democratic National Committee set it to where he would win. They heavily were for Clinton.
Yes.
And also, too, she had the super PACs, which I'm heavily against. I believe we should get rid of.
I got you, but don't get off track, though. So, okay, we know that the DNC favored Hillary, but where does the conspiracy to have Trump and Hillary run against each other to keep Bernie out come from?
Well, I believe in a weird way that Trump might have bought his way onto the Republican nominee to. I'm sorry if I'm not making any sense.
You know, it's not making sense. I think you're realizing it doesn't really make sense. Here's what happened. Hillary was the nominee because the DNC favored Hillary. Trump was the nominee because Republicans lost their minds, and he was able to use the combination of, clever nicknames and the idea of being an outsider to an electorate that was well primed to fall for it, partially because of their hatred for Obama. I think that they were two different things that took place. I don't agree with your assessment that there was a unified conspiracy for it to be Trump versus Hillary so that Bernie wouldn't be president. That's my view.
Actually, well, I appreciate that. You actually helped me clarify it a little bit. I've just been kind of confused over this.
All right, good. Well, I'm glad to allay your confusion, and I really appreciate the call, but I've got to move on because I've got a bunch of people who want to get on here today. Let's go next to our caller from the 619 area code, if we can. Who's calling today from 619?
Is that me?
That's you.
Okay, perfect. I was calling because I had a question about the demonetization of YouTube.
Demonetization, yes. It's difficult one to say.
Yes. Okay, so are we can we agree that the reason why mainstream media doesn't talk about certain topics is because they don't want to offend their advertisers? Would that be a fair assessment?
I think as a general principle, there's no doubt that there is influence in terms of what you do and don't see on corporate media based on the whims of advertisers. Sure, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So why would it be any different for YouTube?
Tell me more about what you mean.
Okay, so if mainstream media doesn't talk about certain topics because they don't want to offend their advertisers, why wouldn't YouTube feel the same way? Like, okay, these leftists are offending corporations that are advertising with us.
Right.
Let's shut them down.
Oh, yeah. No, you're completely right. I mean, that's the whole problem. YouTube started out as one thing, and now it's basically becoming, through these monetization policies, it's basically becoming just like corporate media. And in fact, it's mostly legacy corporate media channels that have a YouTube presence that are being propped up by YouTube. I completely agree. It's becoming the reason it would be different is because YouTube started as something very different. But listen, it was bought by Google. It's become huge. It's influenced in many of the same ways that corporate media is. So you're completely right. It's basically become like corporate media.
So like, what do we do moving forward? Because I saw the idea of a union, YouTube union being propped up, but it kind of got shut down by other YouTubers. So I'm just concerned, like, so what should we do moving forward?
The best thing to do is fund the shows that you like directly, because that makes them not have to worry about what it is that's happening with monetization. YouTube did do one thing. YouTube CEO recently said, in a list of all sorts of stuff, much of which is not great, she said, it's really important for people to be able to upload whatever they want to YouTube, assuming it's not illegal. So that's great. As long as you can upload whatever you want to YouTube, if your audience is funding you directly and you don't have to rely on YouTube's monetization, that's the best path forward, to be quite honest. And it's the most reliable one as well.
All right. Thank you, David.
All right. Appreciate the phone call. Thank you. Let's go next to our caller from the 516 area code. Who's calling today from 516?
Hey, David. It's me, John, from Long Island, New York.
Hey, John. What's going on?
How you doing? How's the vacation?
Vacation was great. It was really good.
Love that. I'm just calling because I'm just wondering how come politicians don't I feel like politicians don't really run on trying to make like America like make a lot of money in terms of like we could benefit from having a surplus of energy if we had more solar panels and more wind turbines and had the ability to store all this electrical energy, and we could sell it to other countries. Like, how come we don't really do something like that, or even like just get in the horse business, like owning a lot of horses, getting to the horse market?
John, let me
like
ask you something. You're not hitting the phone with a hammer, are you?
No, I'm sorry. I'm not on speaker.
Okay.
It's a little raining out here.
Got it. Maybe it's raindrops hitting the phone. Listen, the horse market, you're saying that the U.S. should buy a bunch of horses or breed them and then sell them to who?
I mean, not really specifically horses, but
okay.
I'm just saying because Turkmenistan, they have a lot of horses, and I believe they somewhat have a good stake in the horse market. But what I'm really trying to say is because Russia and China, they're like China specifically, they're doing a lot of solar panels. They're making a lot of electricity, and at one point they could have a surplus. When you have a surplus of energy, you can profit off that much more so. Right now, today in America, the most employers are from Walmart and Amazon, and that's not really, we can't really make money off a Walmart-based economy. Do you know what I'm saying right now?
Yeah, it's, you're saying a lot of different things and I'm doing the best I can to parse it. But just because of that hammering on the phone, I'm going to think about this one offline and then follow up. And I'm going to let you go for now. But I really appreciate you laying out your perspective.
All right. I'm sorry, David.
No problem.
I'll talk to you again soon.
All right. John from Long Island. Very, very good to hear from you. Let's go next to, okay, where do we want to go next? Let's go to Joshua from the 210, who we haven't heard from for months. Hey, Joshua, what's going on?
Hey, can you hear me all right?
Sort of. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say I love the show.
Thank you
so much for taking my call.
My pleasure. Oh, is that it? Did you have a question today?
No. Thank you, David.
All right. Okay, Joshua. Very good. Wow. All right. Everything happening today. Let's go next to our caller from the 716 area code. Who's calling today from 716?
Hello, David. My name is Frank. I am from the Niagara Falls area. How are you doing today?
Good, Frank. Great to hear from you.
Great to hear. So, I know you touched on this a few weeks ago, and I just wanted to elaborate on it. You had touched on the idea that the Bernie Sanders free public college tuition plan is a fantastic one, and that there are calls from some to also look at the costs surrounding college, such as, certain fees, textbook prices, and room and board in the area, rent in the area, food.
I said this, or who said this? This is something I said?
Yeah, well, you said basically the costs surrounding college. I remember you kind of touching upon that.
Okay, yes.
A few weeks ago.
Certainly part of what we need to figure out with college is not just how to, the idea of making public universities and colleges tuition free, but we also need to deal with the skyrocketing cost as well. That's for sure.
Yes. See, my main issue with the current mainstream conversation is that I feel like that's oft being ignored, because my fear, if we are to completely make public college tuition free and that is it, is that now all of a sudden these markets will see that, well, students have more money, and we can still exploit that by raising textbook prices and, making it so.
I don't know about that. Here's why I don't think that that's the way it would go down. Because when you talk about making public college and university tuition free, that's only public colleges and universities. And thus, if you're going to start skyrocketing the cost of textbooks and all of these other things, that's going to make all of the private colleges and universities even more unaffordable relative to the public ones. And I just don't think, I'm rarely a person who says, no, the market is going to prevent that from happening, but I just don't think the market would bear that. I don't think that that's what would happen at all.
Do you think that the industries that are for profit, or the elements of the industry that are for profit, wouldn't still try to figure out how to exploit loopholes in the system?
That is always going to be the case. Yes, absolutely. And that's why the plan has to be designed thoughtfully and accounting for what the for-profit companies are going to do. There's no question about that. I just don't think it's going to happen in the way that you're describing.
Do you think that, see, this is the one question I'd love to talk with Bernie Sanders about if I were ever to be able to discuss this with him.
Yeah.
If there was a way to set kind of prices either where they are or make those affordable as well.
Well, then you're talking about
we
price
all know
controls.
that-
You're talking about price controls on private colleges and universities, and that starts to get a little bit dicier for a number of different reasons. I think that the idea would be if you make public colleges and universities tuition free, it'll put downward pressure on the private schools, because even if the private school is better than the public school, which is not always the case, by the way, if it's drastically more expensive, accounting for the free college tuition or tuition paid for through taxes, it may force some of those private schools to reconsider what they are charging.
That would be wonderful, and I do think that would be a wonderful side effect of all of this.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just do have my anxieties that because I'm always pessimistic about a lot of industries that, you know, they don't want to let go of those margins that they're currently making. They're all about growth, constant growth. I see it everywhere I go with factories and everywhere I've ever worked. It's just this industry, having been just a few years out of college, I know exactly how they try to nickel and dime you at every opportunity.
Yeah,
But
well, listen, you're
I
right
do
to be.
appreciate-
Any plan is going to have some unforeseen consequences and some negative consequences, but we want to be thinking about these things more macroeconomically. Frank from Niagara, really appreciate the call. Hope to hear from you again. I'm going to take a quick break. If you're holding, don't hang up because I will be going directly back to the phones right after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome back to the show. Let's get right back to the phones at 617-830-4750, starting with our caller from the 347 area code. Who's calling today from 347?
Hi, this is Eddie from Harlem.
Hey, Eddie, what's going on?
Anyway, great fan. I've been watching you for the last 3 years.
Thank you.
Incredible. All right. My question is, if Trump loses in 2020, don't you think his influence on the Republican Party is going to be there long after he's gone? He
Absolutely.
will still hold power, I believe.
Yep.
You know, he will have the influence of the voters, his base still.
I think it's a little bit more nuanced. It's not that once Trump is gone. So at some point, Trump's going to be gone. It could be in 2020, could be 2024. I don't think it's that Trump is personally going to maintain influence over voters. I just think that the Trumpification of the Republican Party is going to persist for a long time. The idea that it's fine to have, I mean, listen, George W. Bush was no genius, but with Donald Trump, the idea that it's fine to have a completely ignorant person of economics, diplomacy, just everything, that's okay, that it's okay to have candidates that speak to others in the way that Donald Trump does, that do policy by tweet. I think those, like the coarsening of the dialogue, is what the effect of Donald Trump is going to be beyond Trump. It's not so much that Trump will influence voters, it's that he's influenced the Republican Party.
Yeah, but what if he has his news network? He will have
that
large
could be
influence on these voters.
It's possible. I mean, I don't know. He's promoting OAN more and more, and I wouldn't be surprised to see once Trump is gone, whenever that is, from office, getting more involved with OAN, which he just seems to be just thrilled with, as I predicted he would be from months ago. But yeah, maybe he would look at starting a network. Maybe not. I mean, if he gets reelected, he's going to be almost 80 years old when he's out of office, and maybe he's just going to retire.
One quick thing. What are your thoughts about Trump's tweet about Fox News today?
Didn't see it. What did he say?
He's saying that maybe they should go all the way left, and maybe Fox News should go to OAN.
Oh, did he actually tweeted that this week?
Yes.
Did not see that, but not surprised, and I'm doubling down then on what I just said.
I look forward to your video about that.
All right, thanks. Really appreciate the call.
Thank you, David.
Take care. Yep. Okay, let's go next to our caller from the 781 area code. Who's calling today from 781?
Is that me?
That's you. Who's this?
This is Alex from the South Shore area, Boston area.
Hey, Alex. What's going on?
Doing good. I had a question that might be a little personal. I know your mom watches the show, so have you ever tried psychedelic drugs?
No, I have not.
Oh, okay. Okay. I did have a couple other questions actually ready. Throwback to your interview with Richard Stallman. Did you learn anything from that? Did you change anything from that?
It's so hard to know what exact interview or clip or story made me change my view. I think I learned a lot from Richard Stallman in general, but I couldn't give you a list of what I learned.
Okay. And also, there's a new man that you might be interested in interviewing. Just a recommendation for the show. Todd Weaver. He's about to release a phone for his company that's in line with Richard Stallman's philosophy. I think it'd be an interesting interview. And if you wanted to interview crazy people again, the Socialist Rifle Association. I don't know, just things I wanted to see on the show.
All right. Have never heard of either of those, but I will look into them.
All right, have a nice one, David.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Always great to hear from the South Shore. Let's go next to our caller from the 702 area code. Who's calling today from 702?
Hi, this is Christian. Is this me on there?
Yes, it is. And are we on speakerphone or Bluetooth, Christian?
You were, but now you're on handset.
Genius. I love it.
Awesome. So I know you've got a lot of callers. I'll make it quick. But it is somewhat substantive. Been a fan for 10 years. I'm curious on your take on some policies I've recently re-explored and kind of changed my mind on.
Okay.
I've always considered myself kind of, I hate labels, so I don't even like the word moderate because it implies that the truth is in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
But
which
ultimately,
I
try to avoid extremes.
Right.
And recently I've come to the realization that a lot of preconceived beliefs that I would think I wouldn't, I'm a hyper-liberal, love politics. Even I think, had been victim of a lot of propaganda and information campaigns or disinformation campaigns. And I'm curious if you've ever thought about nationalizing natural resources, much like Norway does to their oil. Because I was thinking about it. Oil in America, for example, is ran by a handful of families.
Right.
And in countries like Norway, the country actually profits directly from selling the oil itself with no middleman. And you know business. Who in business likes middlemen? And it's kind of a strange concept to think about. I mean, we're already talking about healthcare, right? We're already talking about education. Why aren't natural resources being added to the discussion? Because oil is like $1 trillion plus industry.
Well, I think more than just the size of the industry, I've thought about it because... So what's the argument right now for making the internet a public utility? The argument is that the internet is so fundamental to every aspect of almost everyone's lives that the idea of making it a saleable product for profit starts to become problematic. And I think that would be the reason. I think we should get off of fossil fuels, but to the extent that every aspect of what we do relies on them, why are we allowing for-profit corporations to take advantage of that? Now, the only problem with that is
exactly.
Often, so the argument that a pro-business center-rightist would make is, hold on a second, it was for-profit companies that took the initial risk financially, and often it's more than just a financial risk, to establish the systems to harvest the oil. Therefore, it would be wrong for the government to just come in and take them over. And I'm not completely, I mean, there is some logic to that argument, but that doesn't, to some degree.
Like the subsidies that we employ, essentially, it's like these pharmaceutical companies. It's
yes.
our tax. Like I've looked into it, even the Bush family.
Right.
The CIA gave George Bush, like he didn't. So it's like to some degree, yes, there's going to be.
Wait, what happened? The CIA gave George Bush what? What did the CIA give George Bush?
Oh, the CIA gave the Bush family their oil start. Probably because he was so invested in the CIA career-wise. Oh yeah, it's a crazy. I watched a documentary on it, but the point of all that is to say, I know that individuals are still going to be. So take Elon Musk even.
Right.
People criticize Tesla because it was birthed through subsidy, but the reality, of course, is everybody wishes they could get a $5 billion subsidy from the government. Not everybody's qualified to, so that doesn't take away from the credit of the achievement of starting the company. But to some degree, when we're talking about the product, the property of the country itself, because Tesla is not the Tesla and the products it produces are not the property of the country just because they gave them a subsidy.
No, and it's not a resource in the same way that oil is. Yeah, right.
Exactly, right. And I'm with you. Off of fossil fuels is long-term, ideally, but it's still a huge portion of not just our economy, the international economy. And it, like you said, it just doesn't make sense to me that these people profit. The pharmaceuticals are the most insane example of that, of course, because literally we're funding the research development start to tail end, and then at the end of it, they go, okay, now we're going to rip you off. That's ludicrous.
Yeah, particularly when a lot of the people doing the research went to, public school and they rely on the justice system and law enforcement to enforce contracts and make sure no one steals their stuff. But yeah, I mean, listen, from a practical perspective, Christian, we're going to get off of fossil fuels sooner than we nationalize oil. So I think that we should just put the focus on that at this point.
Well, and not to take too much time, I'm curious because it is very radical, right? That's part of why, and this is, I don't mean to take up too much time, but I'm actually curious about your thoughts on this. So I had a discussion with a friend. Long story short, a lot of people are really feeling Andrew Yang.
Right.
Because he seems like a young, ideas-driven guy who's less wrapped up in the politics of it.
Sure.
I actually, to be honest, if I'm being frank, I kind of lean towards Yang because he seems a little more savvy.
Okay. Hello? Okay, that was weird. Well, listen, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to say about Andrew Yang. I've talked about him before, but that was weird. Okay, let's go to Dante from Florida. We haven't heard from Dante for a while. Dante is, last time he called in, he was a Tulsi supporter. Dante, you still with Tulsi?
I'm actually a Bernie Sanders supporter, but I do support Tulsi Gabbard's candidacy. But, yeah, she's still a pretty progressive candidate. I never expected her to win the nomination, but
okay, I think you're right about that.
But my question was, do you think that there's a possibility that Elizabeth Warren be the
Dante, you're breaking up. You've got a bad connection. I heard, is there a possibility that Elizabeth Warren what?
Do you think that Elizabeth Warren would be the candidate that the establishment fully gets behind in the 2020 Democratic primary?
As opposed to who? As opposed to Trump or as opposed to other Democrats? Are you saying in the primary or what?
In the primary.
Will the establishment get by? I mean, listen, they might have no choice. At a certain point, listen, the Democratic establishment is not going to vote for Trump. So they are going to push for an establishment candidate in the primary. It seems to be Biden. If it's not Biden, the most establishment-seeming people to me strike me as Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg. Is Warren more establishment than Bernie? Yes, I guess if you're going to put everybody, kind of like on a number line, Warren's more establishment than Bernie. But ultimately, the establishment is going to have to figure out how to work with whoever wins the primary and support them against Trump.
Yeah, but I was just thinking it's seeming more like it'd be Elizabeth Warren than anybody else because Kamala Harris isn't really going anywhere. She's been stuck in the same spot.
Well, you're asking a different question. You're now talking about who's more likely to win, but I thought you were asking me who the establishment
I said
would like.
Who's the establishment going to end up fully backing? Because it's not going to be Joe Biden. It doesn't look like, because he's going down in the polls and he's losing support even from establishment donors and the establishment class, the media, and all of that.
Listen, there's not going to be that long of a
Warren.
period. At a certain point, it may become clear that it's not going to be Biden. And there's not going to be that long between that point and when the primaries are decided. So there's not going to be that much time for the establishment to say, oh, we're now shifting this way or that way. I think the establishment candidates are Biden, Harris, Buttigieg in that order. I agree with what you're saying. It doesn't look like Harris and Buttigieg are going anywhere, though.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like the entire Democratic leadership, the DNC, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, it's not like they're just gonna sit back and not try to get influence over whoever the potential nominee is. So it seems like they're going to get behind whoever their best chance to beat Bernie Sanders that they think would be, and it seems like Elizabeth
I don't know
Warren.
that the I don't know that the establishment would be thrilled for it to be Warren instead of Bernie. On policy, they end up in almost identical places. Warren comes from a slightly more establishment background than Bernie, though.
She's not really committed to Medicare for all. She would continue the status quo on foreign policy.
I don't know that on foreign policy, Bernie and Warren are very far apart. What's an issue? What's a difference on foreign policy?
She just hasn't really made it a priority. Bernie Sanders, he made it a priority to get through that the vote to end U.S. involvement in the war in Yemen. Elizabeth Warren hasn't really made much of an effort to do anything like that.
You're talking around the edges. That's not evidence that they would be substantively different on foreign policy. But that's a big thing.
That's the first time anybody ever had the war powers invoked in the Senate. So that is a big thing, and that's a big difference between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. So
their platforms are not hugely different, but we'll see what happens, Dante. Always great to hear from you, my friend.
All right, nice to hear from you.
Okay, good to hear from you. I'm glad for you to hear from me as well. All right, that's it for today. Sorry to everybody I didn't get to. We will take a quick break and be back with plenty more right after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, great to be back at it. Audience questions. Missed 3 last week because of the vacation, but I'm back, and these are good ones. First question. Hey, David, what's the worst that could really happen with a Bernie or Warren presidency anyway? Republicans are pretending like it could be the end of the world. What are people actually afraid of? Are things so good right now that Bernie or Warren might ruin everything? This is very astute. When we think of the policies that somebody like Bernie or Warren would put in place, what is the worst that could happen, right? I mean, listen, there's the idea Democrats won't protect us because they're too scared to use the military. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, unlike Donald Trump, don't believe that they are the most knowledgeable people in the room on every issue all the time. They would follow the recommendations of the military and intelligence community. They would meet whatever threats our intelligence community and the Pentagon and the Defense Department present to them, period. The idea that they are going to say, no, we're going to do nothing and let people just attack. Come on, that can't seriously be something any thinking person believes is a risk. Number 2, they'll ruin the economy. They're going to blow up the debt like every other president has done, other than Barack Obama, who actually slowed down the growth of the national debt. Historically, employment does better under Democratic presidents than Republican presidents. The stock market does better under Democratic presidents than Republican presidents. There is no evidence whatsoever to suggest that we should be worried. And as far as debt goes, the debt has been exploding for how long has it been exploding? The more we understand about debt, including modern monetary theory, we understand that just debt in and of itself, just the number, doesn't tell us whether the economy is doing poorly or well, or whether the president is doing a good or a bad job. Why are we deficit spending? Is it economically stimulative? If we are going to deficit spend, if it was necessary to make sure everybody has health care, that would be worth it, because people who are healthy work more, they earn more money, they generate more tax revenue for the government. So again, the fears of a Democrat will destroy the economy are completely unfounded. And so the worst case scenario of Bernie being president or Warren being president, we'll have more respect from other countries around the world. We will finally start making sense when it comes to foreign policy and trade policy and whatever else. The worst case is some of the programs that Bernie or Warren want to do might end up not completely paying for themselves. And then we'll have a little bit more debt like we do with every president. I'm being sort of facetious, but also not. I mean, you're asking the question in the exact right way. What is the nightmare scenario of a Bernie or Warren presidency? There is no such nightmare scenario. We're in the nightmare scenario right now. And I think it was Trump who said, didn't Trump say to black people, why not vote for me? I mean, things haven't been going so well for you guys anyway. Have the status quo, center left to center right presidents we've had really been working out that well for everybody other than the richest? I think the numbers make it pretty clear. So yeah, it's good that you're being skeptical of this idea that Bernie and Warren as presidents are going to somehow destroy our way of life and everything that we hold dear. Doesn't make any sense. The facts don't bear it out. Don't even worry about that. Hey, David, is the idea of impeaching Trump over? I'm not hearing very much about it, but at the same time, supposedly Jerry Nadler is running an impeachment inquiry. What the hell is going on? So listen, here's the answer. I don't care either way. And what I mean by that is we should know if there's going to be an impeachment inquiry or not. But I've said before, at this point, the possibility of the impeachment inquiry is doing nothing for the left. It's a distraction, okay? If anything, it's hurting the left. Internal debates about should we do an impeachment inquiry or should we not do an impeachment inquiry? Pelosi says no, and Nadler says yes, or whoever says yes, no, whatever, and they get into these arguments. That's how you lose, okay? Option one, start the impeachment inquiry right away. I'm fine with that. I think that would be damaging to Donald Trump. It would take away some of the power of Donald Trump's narrative setting ability within the media. That would be fine. Decide we're going to table the impeachment inquiry until, for example, November 1st, 2019, or February 1st, 2020, or whenever Democrats say this is when the impeachment inquiry will be most damaging to Donald Trump. Great. I'm fine with that as well. Yes, it's playing politics. Oh, no, it's okay. If that's the idea that we could do more damage to Trump by starting the impeachment inquiry at some later point, let's do it. Or no impeachment inquiry. Let's just win 2020 and put our efforts on that. I'm fine with that as well. So I don't know if the idea of impeaching Trump is over, or more accurately, doing the impeachment inquiry, which would be the first step, the sort of pre-impeachment inquiry. I don't really care as long as everybody is on the same page and we understand what the impeachment inquiry would lead to and what it would not lead to. The impeachment inquiry would lead to making public a lot of the content of the Mueller report, which most people haven't read. That's good. It will damage Trump. It will lead to media stories about the impeachment inquiry. That's good. That's time that is not being manipulated by Donald Trump, and other good things. The impeachment inquiry will not lead to the removal of Donald Trump via an impeachment conviction in the Senate. It just won't, okay? So as long as we understand what it will and won't do, I'm fine with doing it now, doing it in 6 months, or doing it not at all. But we've got to stop going back and forth about it. And in that sense, I'm not displeased that discussions of impeachment has sort of evaporated. Meanwhile, though, based on Trump's erratic behavior over the last 10 days or so since we started and since ended our show vacation, more and more discussions of removal under the 25th Amendment for being unfit to serve have surfaced and are perpetuating themselves in social media. Also don't know that that's going to go anywhere, but I'm totally fine with not pursuing impeachment against Donald Trump, and I'm completely fine with doing it as well. Hey, David, let's talk about white privilege. Do poor white people have the same privilege as rich white people? I'm going to answer the question. It's not a hugely relevant one because the question of privilege is better suited for, if you want to look at racial privilege, you need to really look at it where as many other variables as possible are held equal so that you're really just looking at the variable of race. So the question of whether a rich white person has more or less privilege than a poor white person is a fine question to ask. The answer is easy. A poor white person has far less privilege than a rich white person. I mean, there's the question. That's your answer. it's not a very interesting question because it doesn't really relate to the problems we're trying to deal with in society. If everything other than skin color is the same, then we can look at the specific effect of skin color as a factor. And when you do that, if you imagine a poor white person and a poor black person, if the only difference is race, then there is some degree of white privilege that the poor white person has over the poor black person. And in fact, there are some really interesting studies with regard to employment where they were for jobs were open, low-skilled jobs, whatever. I think some were housekeeping, custodial type work, other low-skilled jobs. And really big studies were done with thousands of resumes with identical skills. Names were different. Traditionally white-sounding names versus traditionally black-sounding names were sent out, and the response rates were tracked. And sometimes the white-sounding name with the same credentials as the black-sounding name would get as much as a 50% higher callback or interview rate. So that's an example. We're looking at low-skilled jobs. You're not talking about wealthy people or even upper middle class or middle class people. And you see that there is a specific difference when varying only names that imply a certain race. Okay, that's interesting to look at. Poor white versus rich white. Of course, wealth confers privilege and wealth confers advantage. Now, I think it's also important to talk about the reality that at a certain level of wealth, wealth can start to override the lack of privilege that might come from some other factor, like race or nationality or religion or gender or whatever, right? There would be a certain point at which one is so wealthy that regardless of their race, they are going to have privilege in society that will mostly make up for a characteristic that would typically confer a disadvantage. So the question is a fine one if you are sort of getting at the privilege that wealth confers, but from the point of view of thinking about, okay, poor white people and poor black people might live in different neighborhoods. One of those neighborhoods might be better connected with public transit. That would be a form of privilege that would relate to race that would not necessarily be obviously visible unless you really try to fine-tune and equate all but one variable, isolate one variable and try to figure out the differences there. That's my thought. White privilege is different based on wealth, but it's not a particularly interesting question since we know, particularly in this country, wealth confers a ton of privilege. If I've misunderstood your question or you disagree with my answer, by all means, let me know. We've got a great bonus show planned for you today. The bonus show is for members and patrons. Members and patrons. Become a member at joinpakman.com or become a patron at patreon.com/David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.